You're listening to Surely a Mystery, straight from Long Beach Island, New Jersey. We're here to share with you all the spooky, scary, and mind-bending enigmas that make up the Jersey Shore. I'm your living host, Anna, here with some mystery, history, and a few tips to proper ghost hunting. So why don't we get started? I always said that I would return to the world of unsolved murders in another episode. Well, it's that time again. First, there's a shocking statistic these days. Murder clearance rates are actually down from previous decades. Historically, murder clearance rates, meaning the percentage of cases actually solved in the U.S., were above 80%. But now, they've plummeted to around 50% in recent years. Because of that, even though we have cameras nearly everywhere and people are more easily identifiable, unsolved cases are increasing. In 2022, over half of all violent crimes reported to law enforcement in over 38 states went unsolved, with some states seeing over 2/3 of violent crimes remaining unresolved. Well, why do you ask? There are some important factors which can be solved, or at least we, as human beings, can change. First, gun violence is a huge factor. Some experts suggest that the increase in gun violence, particularly in urban areas, contributes to lower clearance rates because gunshot wounds are more difficult to trace and investigate. You have to find the casing for the bullet, or pray that the bullet is, unfortunately, still inside the victim, or that it flew nearby. Then, you have to identify the gun with certainty. However, you can make an educated guess on the caliber of the gun based on the wound size and damage to the human body. The other problem is, of course, ghost guns. The sheer ability for anyone to create a gun in their home, or at least major parts of it. I can hardly get my printer to work sometimes, and you want me to 3D print a gun? It's amazing and scary what humans can do today. We can even create 3D body parts with a printer nowadays. The second is the sheer lack of trust in law enforcement. Some reports suggest that a decline in trust between communities and law enforcement may also contribute to fewer solved cases, as many people may be less likely to cooperate with investigators. Okay, when I was growing up, we were told to fear the Stadies. You were a little bit more fearful of local Leos from out of your area, and definitely late at night, you tended to be more cautious. But to be honest, every single profession has fraud and corruption. But what is something interesting to know? Who should you be most leery of? Ready for this? It's not cops, not police of any kind. Yes, there'll always be a few bad apples. But financial services, real estate, medical billing, and technology have the greatest number of prosecuted fraud cases and sheer deceit. Individuals with access to sensitive financial information, high-value transactions, or positions of authority are at higher risk of engaging in fraudulent activities. Think about the whole title fraud, where you wake up one night and you suddenly don't own your home anymore. Or credit card fraud. It's not just people from other countries who are interested in your personal information. Along with number 2, is going to be obvious. Racial disparities in who gets murdered. There is evidence that murders of black victims are less likely to be solved than those of other racial groups, and the gap is widening. Why? Well, if I hear that snitches get stitches one more time, I'm going to scream. If my nice old lady neighbor gets shot and I saw you do it, I'm snitching on the tip line. Yes, sometimes they can identify you on those tip lines, but if you give enough specifics to the crime, they can find evidence any other way than having you testify the cops and CSI will do it. But the culture is still there. You're not only fighting the cops who you suddenly don't trust, but also the locals who might get you or be in a gang and might seek revenge. This does happen at certain cities in particular. For example, major cities like Chicago and others are experiencing low clearance rates, with some cities seeing arrest rates in the 30% range. Lastly, there are exceptional clearances. Some police departments are increasingly closing cases as exceptionally cleared, meaning that they're closed without an arrest or charges being filed, which can mask the true extent of unsolved cases. If you watch enough First 48 on A&E, you'll see these cases where they pretty much know who did the murder, but they themselves are on to the next case because they don't have enough evidence to prosecute. Or they get murdered, or they go to arrest the guy or gal and they commit suicide before they get arrested. So those cases are often left as unsolved. Now, I've picked 2 John Does, 2 women, and a whole family. These are all unsolved cases in New Jersey, but for very different and maddening reasons. I can give a few hints as to what I think can help solve the case, or a few reasons that I think it actually might have happened. I'm not saying that these are fact, but they're just conjecture, good guesses. I have no stake in solving any of these. I simply did research and picked them out of local archives and the Doe Network. I stayed away from potential overdoses, hit-and-run accidents, and those where heart attacks or potential natural causes or suicides could be the reason. So let's start with Old Bridge John Doe. That's what I'm calling him. He was found on December 9th, 1996, around 9:30 in the morning near Old Mill Road in Old Bridge. This falls into what I would call an execution style of unsolved murder. In the old days, it was said that certain ethnic groups would have taken people out to the Pine Barrens to disappear them. I don't think that this is limited to just certain ethnic backgrounds. He was found with his hands bound behind him and several gunshot wounds to the head. Someone obviously wanted him dead. The road isn't out of the way really, but maybe in 1996. It was also not too far and a straight shot from the Garden State Parkway. John Doe is still John Doe, but we do know what he looked like. He had sandy-colored short hair, so that could denote a hairstyle preference or ethnic background. Brown eyes, so he could fall into anything from Italian to Spanish. Clean shaven, which means he had time to shave before he died, or he simply liked to have a clean face. He was approximately 160 to 180 pounds in weight, so not too fat and not super skinny. We can tell from reports that he was athletic, about 5'9", so average height for a male of 25 to 35. Other than that, not much distinguishing about him. No tattoos, so you can say he probably was never in the joint, or in a group or culture that required or condoned him getting one. At least, not before he died. But I'm going to say that based on his clothes, I'm going to take a few leaps. He was wearing dark green Ralph Lauren corduroy pants, an Arrow brand print golf cotton shirt with multicolored Ottimo V-neck sweater, and a black Italian Bloomingdale laced dress shoes. Okay, so this could be 3 types of people: a gay male, a golf enthusiast, or a fancy mobster. He also could afford a Bill Blass lamb's wool collared black leather jacket. Now, to me, I'm going to get rid of the golf guys right there. But the weird thing is that the black Adidas nylon swim trunks that he was wearing as underwear. Why? The area was unfortunately known for illegal dumping where he was found. And yes, there was a landfill nearby, a perfect spot for dumping a body. But this body was actually found west of Route 9, so it's in an area of woods, and it's just a great place to dump anything in the woods. So I'm going to head into the snitch realm. So maybe he was someone who couldn't keep his mouth closed, and they decided to close it permanently. However, I'm actually going to go maybe towards the bookie or loan shark angle. Maybe he owed them and didn't pay up, or maybe they wanted to use him as an example. The last possibility is that he was laundering money for some group and got caught doing something that they didn't like. Maybe he was going to be an informant. Maybe he was skimming. He was never reported missing, at least not in this area. So I'm going to think he's probably from New York, upstate, or New York City. Without running or getting a DNA profile, there's no chance of finding out who this John Doe is, and then finding out what he was doing in the 1990s, and then maybe finding out who killed him. My second John Doe, I'm going to call sickle cell Doe. Sickle cell disease is common in African and Caribbean descent, but it's also in those of a Saudi Arabian descent, India, and parts of South and Central America. I didn't know that. I grew up thinking that it was just a black person's disease. Well, this Doe was found in Lawrence, Cumberland County, New Jersey on November 21st, 1979. He had a gunshot to his head, but only one shot this time. His age range, they believe, is between 17 and 28. He is considered biracial with probably a Mediterranean descent. But only two things are clear. He was left-handed and he had sickle cell anemia. The bad part of this Doe was that he had been out in the woods for a while. So the fabric on his body was highly deteriorated. In fact, he probably died in the early 1970s or as late as 1974. For more than 40 years, he was faceless until the Southern Regional Medical Examiner's Office reconstructed what they thought he might look like. Ready for this? Nothing else. Race is just a guess because of his bones and the fact that he had sickle cell anemia. No identifying marks because he had been out there too long. This Doe is a blank slate. Other than that, someone wanted him dead and shot him. Was he shot there? Was he brought there? There are no clues from his clothes. No hair color, no eye color, nothing more than the possibility that he was black or biracial, just because he suffered from a certain ethnically oriented disease. The chances of this one getting solved is, well, sadly, next to zero. You need to wind back the clock and think you have a relative or friend who is maybe about 17 and had sickle cell anemia, maybe was average height. It could be because of drugs, a bad relationship, a gang thing, or really anything. I picked this one because in New Jersey, there are 91 unsolved John Does that we really have no idea who they are or where they came from, and some of them are as recent as 2021. Now let's switch to those cases who have actual names of the deceased, but they're still unsolved. Sandra Cucks. She was found on September 14th, 1976, around 3:30 in the afternoon in a wooden area off Research Road in Montgomery, New Jersey. Now, she was found lying face up in the rear of the car, clothed only in her bra and underwear. Now, she had been strangled with a ligature. Now, the only details are that Sandra Cucks was 37 and was literally found in the Ford station wagon, which was registered to her husband. Now, her husband reported her missing the morning her body was found, around 9:30 a.m. Apparently, she left their home at 8:40 the night before and and never came back. Now, officially, her husband isn't a suspect, or at least that doesn't state that he was a person of interest. Why not? Well, it's not clear why or what alibi he has. But what does strangulation say about the killing? Intimacy and control. It was someone she knew or was intimate with. Yes, I see you're thinking it was the husband or someone maybe she was having an affair with. The lack of planning or impulsivity is also strong in this murder. Were her clothes at her house? Were they in the car somewhere else? Did she change her mind about having sex? Did she make the killer mad? I'm not blaming the victim, but there is a reason that she was strangled as seen by the perpetrator. But this is a case of closeness to the victim, and more than likely a male because of the strength that it took to strangle her. It often takes 1 to 2 minutes at close proximity until death happens through strangulation. How far was the car from their house? Did anyone see her leave or leave with someone the night before? I hate to say it, and I don't really want to go in that category yet again, but I think the husband did it. The next case is Alice Jane Eberhardt, who was 18 years old. Now, she was actually found on September 24th in 1965 on Saddle River Road in Fair Lawn, Bergen County, New Jersey. Now, this one could have been a male or female perpetrator because she actually suffered a double skull fracture caused by a blunt object, first to the left side and then to the right side of her head. But wait, that's not all. This was a very passion-driven killing with 61 post-mortem stab wounds, meaning that she was dead, so this was literally overkill. She was stabbed by an 18-inch kitchen knife to the chest and the neck, which the killer left protruding from her neck. The killer probably suddenly came back to normal after or during the frenzy and realized that she truly was dead and thought, oh my God, what have I done? The killer didn't care about taking the knife or cleaning it, but just left there almost in a fit of panic. Now, here is where it could have started as a potential rape because her clothing and bra was pushed up around her neck and she was nude to the waist lying on her back, but there was no penetrative rape. This all happened in her own home, too, her parents' home. See, she had left her dorm at Hackensack School for Nursing around 2:30 p.m. to go to her parents' house, and was found at 5:30 p.m. when her poor father came home from work. There were no signs of forced entry, and the attack actually started in her bedroom upstairs, continued down the stairs, and into the family living room. According to her autopsy, she died somewhere between 4:15 and 5:15 on that Friday. Now, the killer used a knife found at the scene, but he had come prepared. The killer had brought a special knife, a 4-inch souvenir curved dagger from the Jordanian Pavilion at the New York World's Fair in 1964. It was found between her legs. Now, how special is that knife? It was one of only 1,000 which were ever made and sold at 2 places, either at the fair itself or at the House of Jordan. Like the Idaho killer, this killer took the sheath but left the dagger, kind of the opposite. So they could narrow it down, but then again, it wasn't a time when there were credit cards used by many or videos in stores. Unfortunately, again, we're looking at the victim to know maybe who she pissed off. She was a nursing student. Was there a doctor, another nursing student, or someone related to a fellow student who had an interest in her? The knife does narrow it down to 2 possibilities. First, was the killer of the ethnic background, which was Persian, Jordanian, or maybe just a Muslim faith? Was he there not to rape her, but to mutilate a part of her anatomy? You see, there are many fathers and doctors across the world who cut a part of their daughters' or female patients' genitalia so that they won't stray from being a good wife or daughter. So, did she insult this man, or was this man going to insult her? Did she lead him on in his mind, and then he followed her home to seek revenge? The other possibility is that she was stabbed by someone who simply collected knives and then realized that that particular knife was just not going to do the job. So he grabbed a knife from the kitchen after she was unconscious. The attack was probably because she was struck in the head upstairs. Maybe she wandered down the stairs, hit her head again, and when she was finally incapacitated, the killer dropped the curved knife and went into the kitchen to get another knife. Remove or move her clothing. It was getting late, or maybe the killer heard her father's car pull into the driveway, so he ran out the back or side door, and this was 15 minutes before her father walked in. Now, there's always a possibility the killer was a woman. Yes, I said a woman. Knives are probably the single most used weapon by a woman to kill others. Then there are guns and, of course, poison. But knives are quick, deadly, and passionate. Rage and determination. If a woman is going to kill or inflict pain, it's usually with a knife. Many men know better than to talk to a woman who has a knife in her hand. Could perhaps she come home with a friend, a woman? The woman maybe tried something, or she cornered her because this unknown woman was mad at Alice. Had she stolen her man and then decided to attack her? The rage started. Once Alice was down on the ground, it doesn't take much to stab her 61 times in a passionate rage. For this unsolved case, we would have to know who they interviewed and what was said of her life at school, who knew her routines, and where she lived. This is solvable, but the time is closing for solving it because so many are dead or dying. My last unsolved case for this episode is another knife and gun murder. But this time, we're going to talk about a whole family who was brutally and shockingly murdered. Let me just say that this is almost exactly like a murder which occurred later in 1984 in the Camden area of Pine Hill. William and Catherine Stewart and their 3-year-old daughter Sandra were killed. However, that case was actually solved with an arrest and conviction of Louis Gamby. But this family's case is currently not solved. But there may be a connection between the two. The Deal family was last heard from on October 26th at their Mays Landing Road home in Atlantic County, New Jersey, because that was their anniversary, which they had been celebrating with friends and family. Friday morning, a friend came by to give Gary the usual ride to work, but he never came out. So the guy went to the front door, knocked, it was locked, no one answered. Multiple people over the course of the weekend tried to call them, to no answer. Even one friend stopped by on Saturday because he and Gary had originally made plans to go hunting that day. The door was locked and no one answered, even though the family car was in the driveway. So on October 30th, Monday, 1978, Gary's mother insisted that the family go over and see what was up with the family, since no one had heard from any of them. Gary's brother, Alan, tried all the doors and windows, which were locked and closed. So he broke a window and literally pushed a friend, Michelle, through it. She made her way up to the main hallway, only to find Gary dead by the door, dressed only in his blue jeans. Later, Joan Deal and their 3-year-old son, Jason, were found dead in the Folsom, New Jersey home too. The 26-year-old father, Gary, was found on the floor near the front door, shot multiple times in the head, and for good measure, his throat was slit. His 24-year-old wife was found naked on the bedroom floor, but she was also shot several times in the head, and her throat was slit. Poor young Jason was found in his bed with only his throat slashed from ear to ear. Now, police believe that the killer had literally run out of the .25 caliber bullets in his gun. 9 bullet casings had been found on the scene, and the type of gun was thought to be the murder weapon only holds 9 bullets. The time of death is a little bit fluid, since it was nearly 4 days earlier that they had been seen, and rigor mortis was long done and gone. Now, rigor mortis is the stiffening of muscles after the death. It is a valuable tool in estimating the time of death, but it's not a precise clock. It typically begins within a few hours after death, progresses to a full stiffening of the body, and then gradually dissipates as decomposition sets in. The progression and the dissipation of rigor mortis can be influenced by factors like temperature, the individual's physical condition at the time of death. And rigor mortis begins with the stiffening of small muscles, like those in the face and eyelids and jaws, usually about an hour to 2 hours after death. This stiffening will progress to the larger muscles, including the limbs. And in generally, it becomes fully established, meaning like the whole body is stiff, within 6 to 12 hours after they die. Rigor mortis begins to disappear about 15 to 36 hours, starting in the head, and then literally working its way down the body. The stiffening will persist roughly for 12 to 24 hours, depending on factors like temperature, body condition. In a temperate environment, the full rigor mortis phase can last anywhere from 12 hours and then typically be done 36 to 48 hours. There are things that can hinder it or speed it up, like temperature, a person's health, or underlying diseases, and even how they died. Even whether or not the person has a fever or flu can speed it up. No one has ever been charged with these murders. After the 40th anniversary of their deaths, the New Jersey State Police are hoping with newly developed techniques for DNA and ballistics that the case can actually be solved. The police quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Besides that, who locks the doors behind you after you commit such a crime and you shot them and slit their throats? What motive to kill a mostly out-of-work auto mechanic who'd suffered severe injuries a year earlier from a motorcycle accident? How about that across the street lived the local police chief? Could it actually have been a planned execution and the killer went to the wrong house? There was really no reason people could see for poor Jason, a baby, to get killed. Although he was really young, it was likely that he could have picked out a suspect from a photo lineup. And worst case scenario, if it ended up that the killer was a friend or acquaintance of his parents, maybe he even knew a name or could have given a description. So maybe the child was just killed as precaution to prevent identification. The murder was more than likely happening on their anniversary. So they were just getting ready for bed, or maybe they were in bed. Gary had to pull on the jeans to go to the front door, and that's when he got killed first. He would have never opened the door to anyone late at night that he didn't know. At least that's what friends and family say. And besides that, Gary even knew karate very well. The gunshots were never heard, even across the street at the police chief's house. Did the killer have or use some kind of silencer? Or did people truly not hear anything because the house was set back from the road and it was about a half an acre lot? The police searched for 2 days, nearly 2.5 miles in a circle from the house. There were woods and fields behind the house, but nothing was found. No knife, no gun. But they did recover Joan's wallet days later in Lindenwold, New Jersey, actually 3 blocks from a Red Onion. But nothing else was out of place or discovered in other places outside the home. Local police ruled out the mafia, and they tried to rule out a motorcycle gang. Now, Gary loved motorcycles, but he wasn't and had never been into any of those groups. Later, police did discover that the Pagans, a local motorcycle gang, had a brief connection to him, but it was simply a motorcycle mechanic kind of thing, and there really wasn't any falling out with any of the members. Authorities never could make a direct connection or believe that anyone in the Pagans organization did it. There was no evidence that he pissed anybody off. But in 2015, the police did state that Gary might have made some extra money by helping those with connections to some criminal organizations. It could simply be that he used his mechanic skills or construction knowledge to help out these people. Not too soon after their death, a young drug dealer and his girlfriend near Camden were missing. Due to the amount of blood and pieces of flesh found at their home, they're actually considered murdered. And although they were not directly connected to the deals, they were connected to the people in the local motorcycle gang that Gary knew. Could it turn out to be about drugs or drug trafficking? Police literally just stopped thinking and trying to solve this other crime around 1988. Now remember I said that this was similar to the killings of the Stewarts. Like Gamby was actually hired by, you guessed it, a Pagans associate to kill that family. Well, actually, he was hired to kill a man who was set to testify against a Pagan member. And Gamby was an idiot, went to the wrong house. Did he go to the wrong house again and kill the Deals too? I mean, police actually believe that he was suspected in about 5 other murders in the area. Even, they believe, the Deals. But there was never enough evidence or a motive. No confession and no evidence to tie him to the murders. The sad thing about the whole thing is that Gary was not buried with his wife and son. They were buried in Philadelphia, and Gary was buried near his parents in New Jersey. Now, was there some family suspicion that Gary was the reason his family got killed? No family member has ever spoken, but the simple fact is you didn't bury them together does speak volumes. Unfortunately, I do lean into the gang or drug angle. Who knows? Maybe it was as innocent as he saw something that he shouldn't have, or that he refused to do something that someone had asked him to do. If you know anything, please say something. Even if Gary had done something illegal, there was no reason to kill his wife and son. It was really overkill. And on their anniversary, that speaks to something more personal than a gang members being angry at him. Was it a spurned lover of his wife's? Was it that Gary had an affair and that a man decided to destroy his whole family? This can be solved, but it takes someone like you to help solve it. This missing might have been how they died in the next episode. I picked up a few possible solvable missing persons cases along my research route. So, this has been your living host, Anna, as always, from Long Beach Island, New Jersey. I'm hoping that you'll keep listening, pass the word, and leave those reviews. And I'm always looking for topics, so don't hesitate to email me and ask me to find the answers to something that's puzzling you. This has been Surely a Mystery. Until the next time.